Final round, Missy came out the gates quickly and extended her lead to 6 over Kristen and 5 over Paige, only to watch Kristen slowly cut it down to 1 stroke, heading into 16.
Paige was kind of chewing it up a little bit too.
Paige was.
Eagle.
Well, especially that throw-in eagle, but then she just couldn't keep it together after, which we'll talk about Paige in a second. And then 16 is when the controversy happened that we'll talk about now. And then Missy, though, was able to maintain composure, play smart golf on the last 2. Even what looked like possibly I don't know if this is actually an intentional OB shot.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
But it was very close. It was a very intentional, I'm missing left if I miss shot, which was the smartest thing to do because she could afford the OB shot on 18 to be able to lay up and walk in the win. So congrats to Missy Gannon.
Great win.
Obviously, now we can talk through what went down on 16 that took over social media as far as the attention goes, which is a real bummer for Missy, to be honest, because like I said, she didn't have any control over this. And she wouldn't. I don't
think she's taking it too difficult, you know.
Well, no. Well, I saw some people. Let's talk through Kristen first. Just remind me to come back to Missy's response, because I saw some people coming after Missy, and I want to point something out that I think is a very important thing here. Okay. So, all right. So back to hole 16 we go. Kristen has now cut it back to within 1. Momentum is completely on her side. She throws a not great tee shot to where she's not really in position to birdie per se, but it's in a fine spot and should definitely make par, which would end up keeping pace with Missy. So she throws her second shot, slips a little bit, kicks the disc, basically simultaneous with her release, and right before the camera cuts away,
probably 5
2
inches.
Yeah, not much.
No more than 5 or 6 inches.
Okay. As the camera is about to cut away, the commentators pick up that like something is said to Missy from off camera. So we didn't quite get what happened, but Ian and everyone was like, "What? We need to go back. What is going on with Kristen? Sorry, not Missy, Kristen."
Okay.
Something said to Kristen off camera. So what this was a PDGA marshal stepped in and called a foot fault on Kristen on that slip. Now the slip itself, they replayed in slow motion. We've now looked at it frame by frame, and when you go frame by frame, there is basically 1 frame that separates her disc releasing and her kicking the disc.
Yeah.
So it is basically by 1 frame on a super slow-mo, technically probably a foot fault. But you have to go super slow, making it too close to call in real time when you can't use video evidence. That's important that you can't use video evidence. So this is like real time watching it. It's just too close to call at any point in the tournament. And we saw Paige Pierce have a very similar situation the day before where there was no call made. Yeah. I also think that's too close to call. I'm on the agreement that no call should be made there. We've seen plenty of other players. It just happens. Kristen planted behind her lie where she should have. She slipped. She bumped the disc. In a crucial moment, the PDGA marshal walks in, calls a foot fault, and injected himself into what should have been a very great historic battle in the PDGA Major. Now, Kristen calls her card over, but it doesn't matter because unlike if a card mate calls it, a PDGA marshal doesn't need to be seconded. So this is just an instant stroke penalty on Kristen.
Wow.
Kristen's obviously very frustrated with the call. She tries to kind of remove herself from the situation and refocus on what's ahead, but is clearly frazzled. So she goes on to par 17, and then 18 she has to try to throw in to put pressure on Missy, which that ends up going OB, which leads to her par. So she ends up losing by 2, but if this didn't happen and Kristen is still back 1 going into 17, which how she was playing up to that point, we now have no clue what would have happened on 17 and 18.
She obviously probably wouldn't have ran that.
She definitely wouldn't have ran it on 18, so that would have at least been a birdie, but then you have to question, like, well, would Missy have played nearly as safe?
It's definitely...
There's just all these questions around 17 and 18 that shouldn't have been. Yeah.
I think
if this hadn't happened.
I think it's at least a relief that she was down by 1. I think if it was a tie or a lead, it would have been really bad. It's still not good. Here's the big issue, because like I agree, terrible call. You can't make that call. Like, you know, such a bad call to make. However, here's the deeper lying issue is we have been calling for marshals in like this kind of situation to happen, and the problem is, what are the marshals being communicated with? Like, are they, you know, do they even have it's not like these guys have been reffing for 20 years in the NBA and they know, well, that's just a foul you probably wouldn't call in the playoffs in Game 7. Like, there is a lot of nuance to calling things in sports, and especially in golf, it gets a little different because I think it's supposed to be more black and white than a contact sport like hockey, for example. If they're in overtime in the playoffs in hockey right now, it takes a lot for them to call a penalty because they just want to let it play out. That's kind of what the fans want. That's what everybody wants. So in golf, it is typically a little more black and white, but foot faulting is one of the least black and white rules ever because it is so minute. Kicking the disc historically is not called, just like it wasn't on Paige when she booted the disc a lot further. And you're already dealing with an interesting rule because you're not gaining an advantage in this situation, and you're allowed to mark your disc ahead.
Exactly.
So you in a different rule, you own that space anyway. So it's crazy to call, but I feel bad in a sense for the marshal because like he really was just calling a rule that was broken. Like by the rule book, it was broken. He called it. I wish he would have.
I don't think he knew I don't think he knew it was broken. As we'll get into Kristen's response to what he said to her.
Okay, well, I haven't seen that. I haven't seen Kristen's response yet. But it doesn't matter if he knew or not. He called a rule that was broken. So his call on the field was correct by the real rule book. Agree?
I don't think there was any way he could have seen it. I think if you go frame by frame, it is probably technically a foot fault.
So it was correct.
Technically.
Yes, that's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
But the PDGA is very big spirit of the game, essence of the rule, and I think when you go to that, no, not broken.
Well, okay, but I'm just saying, like, by the rule that's in the book on foot faults, that is a foot fault. So, but like I said, I do not think that makes the call a good call. I'm just saying, like, it does put everything in a tough situation because now, hopefully, what this situation leads to is a launching into A, the rules, and B, the marshals discussing, like, does there have to be nuance to rule calling, or can we just rewrite this rule in a way that doesn't give another situation like this? Because, like I said, the foot fault rule has always been so... It's one thing when you're behind your lie, and you can ask your card mates or even a marshal and be like, is this legal before you throw? But this, when you're dealing with the plant situation, everybody that's played disc golf knows, unless somebody's planning way off to the side or way behind a disc to where it's like they got around an obstacle they shouldn't have, you just never call it. So it is crazy that it was even in the front of the marshal's mind to think about making a call, like to be looking at the disc. That's what's weird to me is like that wouldn't even cross my brain to think about making a call.
What's funny is as Kristen is complaining or talking to the marshal, we have Missy Gannon plant about a foot left of her shot, her lie, at the exact same time.
Well, right, as I said, nobody.
But again, no real advantage was gained there. That's my whole thing.
Yeah.
But okay, let me back up because I have always been, and am still, an advocate for there being marshals on the ground. And so people on social media were confused by me being so upset at this because this is not what I was advocating for. What I'm advocating for when marshals are on the ground is for crucial time violations where it's a very black and white. Like the Nico Lacastro one of the European Open. I think that is a great use of a marshal where I have you on a stopwatch, time violation, here you go. He's managing pace of play. He put the whole card on top, blah, blah, blah. Courtesy violations. That's another one where it's something that, a player yells an expletive or slams the chains or whatever. That's a great time for a marshal to step in because now he can stand between the player and the card and be the bad guy a little bit in that type of situation. Questionable OB calls, like the one at Adam James at Waco. A marshal would have been a perfect person there to have been able to step in and be like, hey, this is OB.
And I also...
Or at least have another opinion. Those are the type of things where... Or there's just a questionable call in general when a player's like, hey, this player's been doing something foot fault wise that I want you to watch her.
I'll say, do you feel like with the marshals, like especially with the OB, should it just be something where they are watching, so okay, I saw what it looks like a foot fault, but they're only bringing it up if the other players in the card, or should they be able to step in?
I think with a foot fault, I think it's similar to an OB call or something where like a marshal being on a card, I think is a great thing because they can have an unbiased set of eyes to step in and help assist with the call. But stepping in like this, again, if Kristen had been 4 feet or 2 feet or whatever left of her lie and she gains an advantage, I'm never upset at a marshal for that call.
Yeah.
Because there is a clear breaking of the rule. Yeah. But here...
It takes a lot to make a foot fault.
There's not, like, if you're watching it real time, there's not a clear breaking of the rule.
Yeah.
Because if you go frame by frame, pretty much every single step puts a foot fault.
Yeah.
If you go frame by frame, so many throws are foot faults.
The disc moving is the only thing he saw, for sure.
You can't, but the disc is allowed to move post-release.
Yeah.
So that's the hard part here, is if the disc is allowed to move post-release,
that is the crazy thing.
You have to know that this disc was not released, which the marshal himself, according to Kristen's report, does not know. In Kristen's
Did he
response,
like what happened? Like what happened to this guy?
I think he'd been staring at people's feet all weekend, waiting to be able to make that call, and then got the opportunity.
Because then he would have had the opportunity.
Read this statement.
Many times.
That's true.
Because I haven't seen this statement.
So, I want to read just this middle part while we're talking about, because this is in the midst of it. She said, when I asked the marshal if he was 100% sure the disc was still in my hand when it moved, his answer was he couldn't focus on two things at once and couldn't see, but he's 100% comfortable giving me a penalty stroke. Which is funny and sad at the same time, but above all, this response was concerning to me because it seemed to reflect a misunderstanding of the rule. You do have to see both things, which is frustrating when such a significant decision is being made alone. So that's my thing is he didn't make the right call because he didn't see it.
I would say I think he
got blindly lucky.
Well, what's being got at? Yeah, I agree. Well, because what's being got at here is he saw the disc get kicked, made the call, and then probably realized afterwards the whole release thing, because I don't think most people would even recall that until this conversation started. I had kind of even forgotten that myself. But yeah, man, I just like, what makes you like, unless you are the biggest Missy Gannon fan of all time. You know, Paige didn't get the call. Maybe there's a discraft tie here.
Well, I don't even know if the marshal was around, but I think that's the other frustrating part is you have players all weekend doing this with no call being had. I explained it to my wife, because my wife was like, because it's similar to, it's not exactly the same, but it's similar to in basketball. If all game you're letting players play a little bit.
Yeah,
right.
And then you just turn on the whistle.
It's all like you're letting, if it's a little tacky foul on the arm, stuff like that, that's being let go all weekend. All game long for the first 3 quarters into the final like few minutes, and then out of nowhere, game-winning shot or a really crucial shot with like 2 minutes left, the same thing happens, and out of nowhere the ref calls it.
Yeah.
It's like, was that technically a foul? Yes. But the precedent that had been set the rest of the tournament was this isn't.
Well, the precedent has been set the rest of forever.
Eternity.
Yeah, I was saying, like, this is
happens
like
and it's not
groundbreaking in disc golf.
Like this happens and it's not. So even if it technically is, making the call here is wrong.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, now we're opening up a can of worms where there's video evidence of Missy Gannon at the exact same time foot faulting. There's video evidence of Paige Pierce foot faulting. I'm sure we can go back and watch video evidence of different step putts and jump putts where, oh no, frame by frame, the same thing I have to do here, frame by frame, those players' feet are off the ground before they release the putt. Foot fault.
The foot faulting.
And it's like to me, what you have to understand about the foot fault rule, if you're gonna call it, is it's should be when a player is gaining a distinct advantage. That's not written in the rule book, but that's how it should be. When Ken Climo called it on Scott Stokely in that viral video over and over, Stokely was, for the first few, a solid 2 feet behind and to the left of his disc.
Throwing
over a tree. So it gave him a distinct advantage. That's a call. You have to make it. If it's a straddle putt and I'm getting farther back to get farther away from the tree, or a little bit left or a little bit right, that's a distinct advantage. You have to call it. In this situation, Kristen was at a disadvantage. She slipped.
Yeah, that's the best.
That's the thing. It's like she's not even, she didn't foot fault until she slipped. So she's already at a disadvantage, and then you're stroking her for the ground not being perfect and giving out on her. Like, what are we doing there? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Right now. Like that's ludicrous to me. And now you're not only hurting Kristen, you're hurting the fans, you're hurting the perception of the PDGA, and you're hurting Missy, because now her title that she won fair and square is having a question mark put on it. So now you're hurting everyone because you just decided to jump in and call one foot fault. Because that's the other thing is how many, I can count 3 marshal calls all time. Yeah, I can count a Gannon Burr time violation. Yeah. I can count a Nico LaCastro European Open time violation. And then I can count this Kristen Lott foot fault.
Yeah, very interesting time to get involved.
And I'm like, what are we doing there? If we're gonna do it, let's be consistent.
It's very bizarre. I'd be curious to know if this guy releases a statement and like if it's something along the lines of like, I regret it, or I double down and I stand by my call.
Well, I don't think this is on him to release a statement. This is where
I don't know if it's on him. I'm just curious if he does.
This is a very good situation and a very good opportunity for the PDGA to act differently than they have historically. In my opinion, the PDGA needs to make a statement, if they haven't already by the time this podcast comes out, because obviously we filmed this a little earlier than it releases. They need to make a statement where there's a public situation. So I think they need to publicly apologize for Kristen. Whether they think it's the right call and they back it up or not, you got to apologize to Kristen there.
There's no way they're going to do that.
And I think they need to launch an investigation into this situation Whatever that means, it doesn't matter. The wording of it, where at least they talk to the guy and make sure there wasn't some weird Missy Gannon bias going on or something. They launch that, and then they say we're going to look at the foot fault rule and at the marshal rule and how they call things to make sure, like, maybe the marshal should have to be seconded.
Yeah,
you know,
that's not going to happen.
To make sure, I agree, it's probably not going to happen, but that's why the PDGA has the reputation they have. Because when we look back historically, Brody buying out the driving range, Paige Pierce complaining about the USWDGC. When this happens and a player stands in opposition to the PDGA historically either turns a blind eye or says it's a jerk move by the player and comes after the player, farther separating them from the player, and in doing so, farther separating them from the fans. This is a great opportunity to have some transparency. Take ownership, because what the PDGA might also do is say the PDGA didn't mess up, the marshal messed up.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
and it's like that's
crazy.
No, the PDGA messed up. The marshal is a representative of the PDGA, whether he's on staff or volunteer, and the PDGA messed up here. The PDGA has to take ownership of that mistake. That's all the fans want is transparency from the PDGA. You're allowed to mess up, but you got to own your mistakes and learn from them, which the PDGA historically has never done. And that's what creates this animosity against them, where the players, the fans, all this have a certain feeling. Because the Pro Tour historically, at least from my eyes, they're very in touch with the players. And when the Pro Tour messes up, they talk directly to the players. They get feedback. And that's why generally there's a little bit of a nicer relationship between player and DGPT than there is between player and the PDGA. This is a perfect example of a time when the PDGA needs to publicly apologize to Kristen and take action to figure out, there might be nothing to do about the situation, but at least publicly be like, we're looking into it. We're going to try our best to figure out a resolution. We're going to work with Kristen. We're going to work with the marshal. Congrats to Missy Gannon. I'm sorry this is how this has happened for Kristen. We're going to look into it. That would go a long way with the public. Historically, I have reason to believe the PDGA will never do that because they haven't historically, but I do think that has to be done.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how the public would perceive it, because it is like the NBA now, they do a refs report, like they mandatory at the end of games, and they will literally like say, we messed up this call, we missed this call. And that just makes people more mad, because then they're like, oh, so you're literally going to tell us you missed the call and you're still not going to be able to do anything about it? Like, so.
But I think that's different than what
I agree.
I'm
This is different because this is more of a
how
like.
Can we make sure it doesn't happen again?
Sure.
Because now this opens up to, when we're in Europe and you have a European marshal, who's to say that they aren't all of a sudden biased and they start calling foot faults on Paige Pierce down the stretch when she's going against Kristen at Worlds?
If that happened in Europe, it'd be so crazy.
Or now there's betting involved.
There's an arms race.
Now there's betting involved. It gets even more serious.
That's what the PDGA
the next point.
Is very, very lucky.
So lucky.
That there wasn't betting at this event, because I think from my understanding, this is just the one major that's not going to have it.
It is literally the only one.
And Kristen would have been the favorite. There would have been so many people with money on Kristen.
Oh my gosh!
And you're going to try to, because look, let's look at this. Let's look at this.
At least the good news is the max bet, at least on. Well, I don't know.
On DraftKings, I don't think it is.
Yeah,
you're just betting odds to win.
Yeah,
but we're just because realistically, Missy Gannon probably would have won this tournament. Mm-hmm. Realistically, I don't think anyone would disagree with that.
That's my $10,000 money line bet.
Well, that's the thing, is if you all of a sudden have someone with $50 on a Kristen lot money line, and this happens, that guy is 100% coming out of the PDGA. Because now you just cost me $50.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And all of a sudden, DraftKings is going to be getting emails left and right of, you better refund this. There's collusion going on. And now, you really, they're so lucky.
Now that Marshall needs a security team.
It could have been very ugly.
Well, that's the other thing that's crazy, is apparently after the marshal made that call, he just dipped. He was gone. Like, there's someone who said that he wasn't with the card the rest of the
Imagine he wasn't actually a marshal. What if that story
he was.
Came out?
He and that's the other thing, is he's been consistently with the PDGA. I recognize him. I forget his name. And I also, people who know him, I think, will probably defend him. I'm not questioning. I'm sure this dude has done a ton for our sport. I'm sure he's a great person. I'm sure he's a great representative. I'm sure he just had a lapse of judgment. But that's what I'm saying, is it's on the PDGA to make sure this isn't able to happen again. Because he probably was unbiased. He probably was trying to do the right thing. He probably did everything right.
What does keep it from happening again, though? Like, if a marshal makes a bad call. I think
making it where they have to be seconded. That's a really easy first thing.
There's a lot of people that need to be around. By a player?
By a player.
Oh, okay.
So a marshal is just another official on the card. So I think the marshal can second a call. Yeah. And I think that if you make it where the marshal also has to be seconded, boom. Already, now there's checks and balances, because now at least if he calls it, it's similar to where someone else has to confirm.
Will we have a different conversation? Let's say is food for thought. Let's say that James OB that everybody agreed was out of bounds. Let's say the marshal was there, had called it OB, but all of James's card mates just don't want to do it. And so they don't second it. Would we be having a different conversation saying marshals need to have absolute power? If that
I don't think that would have happened
because we saw it. We all saw it. It's out of bounds.
It felt like the card mates were uncomfortable because they would have had to be the one to say, I think that's OB.
I would agree, but I'm just saying, like,
versus if the marshal's there and says this is OB, and here's my evidence of why I think this is OB. It only would take one card mate to be like, I think that makes a lot of sense.
You're right, but what if it didn't? That's what I'm saying. Like, is this a situation where it's very pick and choose?
We're a self-officiated sport. Not even every card has a marshal.
Yeah.
So that's to me, we're like,
that's fair.
I just don't think it makes sense.
Yeah, there's probably, listen, with rules in golf, it's really the same with traditional golf as well. I don't think there is a perfect solution.
Because the other thing we have to look at too is tournament directors can act as marshals, and tournament directors get a ton of funding from manufacturers, like for certain events.
Yeah.
So who's to say that all of a sudden you have a player or you have this situation going on and you're a tournament director who is best buds with Connor, name a random manufacturer?
Name MVP.
MVP.
They presented this event. Very good pick.
MVP, Simon's in contention. The tournament director got all of his added cash from there. There's a bunch of Simon fans there, and there's a pressure to make a call.
And he loves Simon.
And he walks up. He's going to see it with biased eyes. He can try to be as unbiased as possible. So like that, I think that having it where there's a checks and balances there where they have to be seconded is a great start.
Yeah.
And I think that's something very easy where the PDGA could implement it tomorrow. Everyone's like, okay, at least they looked and learned from it.
I don't hate that idea.
Very hard to not be biased with that situation.
Well, there is no such thing as no bias. Everybody has bias, to be clear.
No, and I don't think this was. I don't think this was a situation where this guy really wanted Missy to win.
I don't think so either.
I'm not saying. But it could happen.
Sure.
And now that we've seen it, we can see how much power marshals can have.
You watch
enough
Premier League soccer, you'll see bias.
That is something where you do have to now say, what can we do to prevent this from happening if there is a case of bias?
Yeah.
Because what if this clearly wasn't a foot fault? He could do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And say, foot fault. No, I don't care. I don't care if I didn't see it. I'm 100% confident. And there was nothing that could be done.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying is like he in this situation admitted that he wasn't 100% sure the disc was still in her hand. He got kind of lucky it was.
And then he'd just be like every other sport.
And then it's just like now the marshal has full control. He can just walk up and be like, oh, Paul Macbeth's down 3 with 4 to go. Sorry, Gannon, foot fault.
Well,
Sorry, Gannon, foot fault.
That's what every other sport does.
But that's what I'm saying is golf's supposed to be self-officiated because then you also have that going on lead card. And what if on chase card there is egregious foot faults going on and no one's calling it?
Because it's like marshal. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, like the marshals aren't everywhere. And in other sports, if someone is like at least you got 3 refs and they're all watching every play of the game and whatever.
Yeah.
Here you got one guy floating around, maybe 2 or 3 guys, but they're not on every card.
It is crazy that like foot faulting is and has always been so gray and never called. And it seemed like the one thing we didn't really have to worry about. Like it's always just been OB, right? Like OB and time, but mostly OB are the ones that typically like that could change a tournament. And bringing foot faults like into play, it's like you've just started something. Like because like nobody was thinking about foot faults, talking about foot faults. You're watching on coverage, you're not staring at their feet. Like it just wasn't really in the spotlight. Nobody was taking advantage of it. And now all of a sudden, it's all anybody's gonna be looking at and talking about is foot faults, and it's like, oh no.
Well, and I don't think that it necessarily I don't think the fix is for every single card to necessarily. I don't think it has to be every card having a marshal that's always watching. I think it's okay for there to just be one marshal. I think that this was a bad call and this shouldn't happen. But it's kind of like the idea of like everybody who's speeding on the road doesn't get a speeding ticket because there's not a cop for every car that's going down the road. But the idea that you know that at any second there could be a cop around the corner keeps everybody for the most part from speeding. So it's kind of the same thing. You know that at any point a marshal could be walking up on your card. So you're always just kind of like making sure that you're not doing stuff that's sketchy. But
I don't hate the idea of like there being a marshal with lead card because that's where like the most crucial calls are going to be. This is just they just have too much power.
Yeah,
because like they just have way too much power.
That's funny. I like the whole like marshal power narrative. Like, I don't disagree. I just
that's
think
what I'm saying. It's like now
we've got to take the power from the marshals.
Well, now we've just opened up a whole can of worms. Where like I always just expected the marshal was like, hey, you know, Drew Gibson is cyberbullying Cupcake Curtis about taking too long on a putt, and he's like, "Hey, Marshall, get over here. You got to make this call." And now the Marshall's got Cupcake on a clock, right? Like that's how I always viewed marshals being used because like that makes perfect sense to me. It's like a player's like, "Look, it's going to cause a lot of weird stuff. Like, can you come over here and just put him on the clock?"
Yeah.
And go. or hey, we have this OB call, we can't really decide. Can you come in and make the final say on it?
Yeah.
Where we're split, we can't. And that makes perfect sense to me. Yep. But just like foot fault, instant stroke, sorry, nothing you can do.
Yeah,
like that's ludicrous.
That might be crazy. The thing about this butterfly effect, 2 years from now, no more run-ups in the fairway, all standstills.
Yeah,
problem solved.
So this is Kristen.
You can still slip on standstills though.
It's true.
This is because the other thing.
Let's regulate the ground, guys. Let's regulate the turf.
Trevor mentioned it, and I don't want to overlook it. Is we mark the disc in front.
I know.
So
funny.
That's the crazy thing to me is like. Kristen was at a disadvantage if she would have marked it.
She occupied space with her slip that she could have had if she wanted.
That's what but that's the other thing that's crazy to me.
Yeah,
is like I've always disagreed. Why do we mark the disc in front? We can't stand there.
Yeah.
With before, so why do we mark it in front? Like that doesn't make sense to me. We should mark it behind. But since we do mark it in front, then when you look at it from that perspective, this foot fault call makes even less sense.
Yeah, that's right. That's the thing too. Yeah, whenever you don't,
except for whenever you mark it, you don't have 2 sheets of paper. You still just have the one.
Yeah, but a sheet of paper is longer than a disc.
That's true.
It's true. Good point.
So it's just that's the wild thing to me is like if Kristen marks her disc, this is not even a problem. It's crazy.
And that's just another part of disc golf ruling that is just kind of bizarre. It's like, why is it like there should just. It's weird that to give the flexibility there, like why isn't there a rule where you just have to mark from the back of the disc or from the front of the disc or there is no marking? Like it is weird that they give you this little flexibility. And I think like that the whole rule with the whole piece of paper and all this, they're writing the rule to give flexibility to the player because they know it's an imprecise thing to run up behind a disc. And so, it's the most spirit of the rules, I agree, thing to make such a minute call there.
Yeah, why don't we just say
agrees
you
that,
can't, like no more marking
Not everyone.
discs.
There are some people on Twitter that were like, just thought that it was ludicrous that anyone would be like, well, of course that's a foot fault. How are you not calling that a foot fault?
I bet your local league
and
loves
I'm like,
you.
what are you? You're telling me that
their weekly league loves them.
Yeah, crazy stuff. So this is Kristen's full statement. She said, not the first time I found myself at Champions Cup in a controversial situation involving the PDGA. She's referring to, I'll let her say it. 3 years ago, I was told mid-round that my daughter couldn't walk with me, even though she'd be from
that was 3 years
start.
ago?
Elaine Snitchgate.
So that was Elaine King, who at that time was operating as a DGN commentator, but was a PDGA board member, called in a call on Kristen's caddy, where her daughter then had to get removed from her bag because I think she was underage to caddy. I forget the exact rule. Ludicrous call. That was in 2022.
It was bizarre.
Champions Cup, where Kristen ended up losing on 18. Champions Cup and PDGA Champions Cup and Kristen do not have a good relationship. This time, for the first time in my career, a marshal made a foot fault call independently without any input or complaint from my cards mates. I understand that marshals are doing their job and trying to ensure fair play, which I truly respect, but consistency matters. If you apply rules like this, they should equally apply to everyone on every card at all times. Of course, I would never want to gain an advantage unfairly, but the situation was strange. When I asked the marshal if he was 100% sure the disc was still in my hand when it moved, his answer was that he couldn't focus on 2 things at once and couldn't see, but he is 100% comfortable giving me a penalty stroke. Which is funny and sad at the same time, but above all, this response was concerning to me because it seemed to reflect a misunderstanding of the rule. You do have to see both things, which is frustrating when such significant decisions are being made alone. No previous foot faults had been called in the round, and the timing felt unfortunate just as I had gained momentum and was getting back into contention. That said, I take responsibility for letting it distract me, and I'll use this as fuel to sharpen my game and focus even more moving forward. I know I wasn't the best player out there this week. I made a lot of mistakes on the putting green, and with some approach shots, I'm heading home tomorrow with intention of working through those areas and tightening up my run-ups. Even though you can't, that's funny. Even though you can't always predict things like slipping on the course, I'll focus on what I can control to avoid situations like this in the future. Aside from this, California was great. The giant trees I got to see were magical. All the disc golf fans were awesome. You have a great vibe here, and I'm looking forward to visiting this part of the U.S. again. So I hope to see some beautiful moments from this week.
I would say
very good post.
Yes, Kristen,
really well worded.
Disc golf doesn't deserve Kristen.
No,
she is such a classy champion. Every time I watch her in a situation, I'm like, how are you the way that you are?
she's like a sport robot.
Like she wins with class.
She just
she
says
loses,
all the right things.
Yeah,
does
she
all the
loses
right
with
things.
class. She gets wild calls because even when she was like defending herself to the marshal, I was like, I'd be yelling at this dude. Like, are you kidding me? This is a major championships on the line, and she just is like having a conversation with him. And when he's like, look, you can't do anything about it, she just walks away. And I'm like, the stone's on her.
Him.
Like, how did she? I wish I had that type of self-control. It is crazy. It's crazy.
I don't wish you did. I love it whenever I hear you get worked up about this stuff.
I would have said something pretty snarky.
I was just like tweeting up a storm, and meanwhile, Kristen, who it's actually happening to, is just walking up like, all right, I got to focus on this next shot. I'm like, no,
she's
Kristen.
A professional.
She is a like. That's
she
what I'm
is
saying.
A professional.
Is disc golf?
She's like an AI
her.
professional disc golfer.
It is crazy. And okay, so I want to get back to Missy because I saw some people come like upset at Missy that Missy didn't address it in her final speech.
I don't think
what
that's
we
her
have to remember
responsibility.
is at the time all of this was happening, Missy Gannon was walking up to her lie.
Mm-hmm.
Missy, for all we know, didn't even see the foot fault shot.
Yeah,
but she definitely like. She got brought into it like slightly after, but like she probably didn't realize how egregious the situation was until after when she like checked and watched footage and saw social media.
It's also not her business, like, or
so,
it's
like,
not her responsibility.
That's what I'm saying is I don't think like had she watched the whole thing go down, might she have said like, you know, I feel bad for Kristen, maybe, but like she just won again. Missy had no part in this. It's not like Missy was like, hey, Marshall, watch her feet. Missy was just playing her game.
She was winning the tournament, and this tournament took place over 4 rounds.
Yeah,
not over one shot.
Like Missy did everything that she was supposed to do. Because that's the other thing is, what do you want Missy to do? Like lay up a putt to give Kristen the stroke back? Like, no, that's not gonna happen.
I don't think Kristen would want that. Two tough holes to play after that to win the tournament.
No one would want that. I'm sure if you asked
that'd be
Missy,
disgusting.
I'm sure if you asked Missy, Missy would much prefer that this hadn't happened because she probably still would have won. And now she wouldn't have any questions. So.
And she still shouldn't.
And she still shouldn't. And anyone who had the I think it's just going to be always tainted by like, if you watched it, you always know of like, man, I wonder what could have happened with Kristen. But that's a shame for Missy. It's similar to when Big Germ won. Well, it's a lot different, but it's similar. I've heard Big Germ say this of when he won USDGC back in 2016. He's always said, I wish I could have played that final round because I think I still would have won.
Whenever people are counting up Missy's majors in 5 years, I don't think they talk about this.
But I'm just saying it's a shame for Missy, and I don't think Missy would have wanted this foot fault call to have happened because she would have just wanted to win straight up, where you can't question anything now. So I don't think it's ludicrous that Missy didn't say anything in the post-round interview because like she just won a major. That was the last thing on her mind, as it should be the last thing on her mind. So the people who are coming after Missy, I think that you're in the wrong there. I think
Jokesters.